Hey there, Sovereigns. Monica Grace from cardreadingqueen.com here, and today's topic is what the process of healing a big separation on your twin soul journey looks like for me. So I'm going to share my own story, and through it, I hope that you can see some of your own healing opportunities around big separations. So why do you want to heal a big separation? The obvious reason is that as you heal separation in general, you move closer into your twin soul union. So you become closer to your higher power and you become closer to your twin soul. So this is a really important part of the journey, and you can the biggest thing I want to impress is like how to recognize that you are healing a big separation, and just go deeper into that. So the thing that reminded me of this is I have started to garden, and gardening it's an interesting hobby. Some of the things that I struggled with in terms of gardening, the first day I was having to really just rip out weeds. So I was just demoing, I was basically demoing, or like demolishing, I guess is the longer word, demolishing the garden bed that was full of weeds. So I was having to rip out all the weeds, and as I was doing that, I was having to like go deeper into the soil, and I was pulling, essentially coming up against like tons and tons of earthworms. And earthworms are very good for a garden and very good for fertility of soil. And so I was feeling really horrible about pulling up all these weeds, because I was like, I'm definitely going to end up killing some earthworms through this. And so I was in tears, which is very dramatic of me, but I was in tears. I was asking my husband, like, what do I do? Like, should I just stop? And like, how do I, I knew the answer was like, you just have to like do it. But I was asking him for guidance, and he's like, just don't worry about these worms that you're killing. And I of course was pretty upset about that. So, over time, I just pretty much got used to it, and it was, it continues to be a process of healing. Like, another part of gardening that I don't like is that you grow all these seedlings, but you can only plant so many of them, because you have to grow more than you are going to plant. And then as they grow, you have to trim this, you have to like only save the strongest of them. And this as well is it's really hard. It's like you're playing God with a bunch of plants, basically, and like an ecosystem of soil and whatever lives in that. And it's like hard for me to wrap my head around. Now, I know that the reason is because I've been kind of privileged to not have to experience this firsthand before. Obviously, like, in order for me to live, lots of other things have died. Like the house that I live in is built on, at one point they had to excavate the earth, that like they had to excavate the property in order to build the house. The roads that I drive, they had to take down trees. They had to, probably hurt animal, like probably many animals have died for the roads that I have traveled on. Pollution is a problem. Like, there's so many ways, like all the food that I eat, it all had to be grown. Lots of casualties in terms of plants and animals and insects in order to grow, all the food that I eat, in order to grow, meat. Like, obviously, if it's meat, then the animal had to die. And I was a vegetarian for 3 years, because I was kind of horrified by this. And then I basically had to start eating meat again. It was like, I mean, it was a choice, but it was kind of affecting my health. So I had to start eating the meat again. But, yeah, so this is, it's like, I know that all of this is happening theoretically, but then having to confront that so directly was very challenging for me, and still is. Like, I'm working through it, but it's still challenging for me. So this gardening situation is part of a big healing that I'm doing right now. And I'll kind of explain it as I go. But what's really happening for me right now with the gardening is that I'm integrating a lesson that I've been learning for, the past couple months. What is integration? It's basically a shift from separation to union. It's bringing two things back into union that were separated, and it's also understanding the polarity of two things. And so I'm gonna, which polarity, it's really a way to heal separation. And the law of polarity is interesting, so I'm gonna talk more about that. Because a lot of people talk about the law of attraction, but the law of polarity is actually like pretty fascinating and like really useful for the twin soul journey. So these big separations, right now the one I'm healing is around politics here in the US. But before that, I was healing one around religion and spirituality. And so for me, religion and spirituality were separate. I was raised in a religious family. At some point in my early 20s, I rejected that religion. And I rejected God as well, because I felt he had kind of betrayed me, basically. And I was going through a lot of stuff with my ex-husband at the time. He wasn't my ex-husband at that time, but he was going to be my ex-husband in the future. And going through a lot of stuff, and felt that God had like led me astray. So I was pretty against religion. I was pretty against God. And then, within a couple years of like kind of rejecting God, I had found like the law of attraction, which was, focused on the universe. And then I had found tarot and oracle cards, which again, they're very, they're like more spiritual than they are religious. And so it was kind of, I didn't know it at the time, but I was kind of coming back into union with God through these tools and through these concepts. And so over time, I started to, at first I was calling it the universe. Well, at first I didn't even realize what was happening. Then I was, calling it the universe, and I was like working with the energy of the universe and building a relationship with the universe, building an understanding of the universe. And then I read a blog post that said like, oh, if you're still using the word, if you're still using the phrase the universe for everything, it's because you have a block against God, because it's just the same thing. And I was a little startled by that. And then I was like, okay, like I'm going to try this out. And so I started using the word God, and it was very uncomfortable at first because I had associated God with religion. And I was basically like getting to know God again through spirituality. I still saw them as very separate. For a long time, I believed that religion was, and this is still true actually, religion was this patriarchal construct, and it's really about belonging versus not belonging. And there's always, there's an in and an out. And like everything about religion had duality for me. Like, it's like we don't just love God, we also try to avoid the devil, And to me, it was like, okay, religion is like you're worshiping two gods essentially. One is God and one is the devil. And apologies if anybody is offended by this. These are I'm giving you this as an example. Not all of this is my current belief, but I'm just giving this as an example. So I believed that religious people were they were kind of like brainwashed. This was what I was believing at the time. They were brainwashed, and they were mired in duality, the duality of the church. They were, kind of just like following rules blindly without having that relationship. So it was like, and I saw this especially with the Roman Catholic Church, where there's a lot of tradition that a lot of people do, but they weren't actually building a relationship with their higher power. And so it was like they were going through the motions, but there was nothing of true substance there. And I'm not saying for everybody, I'm just saying for some of the people that like I knew from that church when I was a participant. And also for myself, like I can't say I had the strongest relationship with God at the time. And so I really saw religion and spirituality as very separate. But God didn't want me to see that. He wanted me to see the integration of them. And so what he did, there were a couple things. One is that I ended up going, so in the month of January of 2018, I ended up going to 2 funerals. And first of all, I never go to funerals. Like I haven't, before that, I hadn't been to a funeral in like 5 or 10 years. So this was a rare occurrence. The second thing is that both funerals were a full Catholic mass. So I was going back to church basically twice in January. So I went to 2 masses. So that kind of like primed me or reminded me of, what I was raised in, like how I was raised. And I was able to observe the members of these churches, not through like my own biased memories from being a teenager, but rather through how things were in reality. So I got to see that. And then we had planned this trip to go to Italy. And so I had wanted to go to Italy for a long time. My family is from Italy. On my dad's side, it's like a very strong Italian influence. Since I was a child, I have wanted to visit the Vatican. Like that was one of my top things, like on my bucket list. And I don't have a lot of stuff on my bucket list. But that was like a thing that I knew I wanted to do in terms of travel. I knew I wanted to go to the Vatican. So, we did. So basically in February, so I had those 2 masses in January, and then in February we went to Italy and specifically went to the Vatican. And so we ended up going, this was kind of like beginning of February, we ended up going on my actual birthday, which was random, but like clearly, like there's no way to ever top this birthday at this point, because I was at the thing, I was in the place that I have been wanting to see as a child on my actual birthday. So we spent my whole entire birthday at the Vatican, and we saw everything when I went there because it wasn't that crowded. I was there in February in winter, so we got to see everything. There were not lines for things, and we went down, and so I was like really integrating a lot, like seeing so much of my heritage and like my upbringing in this trip. And we ended up going to the treasury area of the Vatican. There, like it's like high security. There are no cameras allowed. Like you're not allowed to take pictures. And so we're making our way around, and I see this huge book that's in a display case. It So I'm looking at it, and I was like looking at it more carefully, and I realized that on this book was the world card of tarot, like a tarot card of the world. Basically, it was like the exact same, like the two snakes and the center, woman, and then like the eagle, the ram, the lion, and what's the last one, the angel, on this book. And I was just like staring at it. I couldn't believe it. Like I'd never like seen anything like this, and I had never heard anything like this. And so I realized I wasn't able to take a picture. I looked online to like try to find a picture of this book, and I have not been able to. But I looked it up later, and I found out that the world card in the tarot is actually, it's based on the four apostles, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Or I don't know if they're apostles, but the four writers of the gospel. And the four symbols of that are for those four gospel writers, or the four gospels. And it occurred to me that, essentially that spirituality was, it was not its own thing. Like New Age is not its own thing. It's actually just an evolution of religion. And I started, as we continued our Italy trip, I started to see that pattern everywhere, where I was basically finding the roots of my current tools, which I thought were, New Age, spiritual, like the true connection to God. And I was finding the roots of those everywhere we went in religion. And so that was really cool. And it was weird because I had been studying tarot for years and years, and I had never come across this idea that the world card, the four symbols, were related to the Gospels. So basically, before I thought, people who were loyal to religion were kind of brainwashed or like not, like ignorant. And now I understand that religion is just evolving. Like it's evolving, and spirituality, everything we practice is really just an evolution of religion. It's also, there's also a cyclical element to it. So a lot of religious holidays have evolved from pagan holidays, for example. So it's both an evolution, and it's like a cyclical evolution as well. So we're understanding just the connectivity between these two things. So this, of course, was a really big healing for me. And it's helped me have compassion for really for everybody and for whatever they believe and however they want to relate to their higher power, and specifically God. And so the good thing about integrating these two things, like you would think like, oh, what's the point of that? And how does that relate to twin souls? The good thing about that, though, is that religion and spirituality were both parts of me. And because I was creating that separation between them, they were at war with each other. And and that was, I would say that was causing a lot of trouble with my twin soul as well, because my twin soul was not religious, and also was not spiritual. So I was creating, I was kind of creating that separation there, instead of just allowing my twin soul to relate to his creator or his higher power in the way that he wanted to. So the reason that this is relevant is because any healing of separation is going to bring you closer to your twin soul union. So that was great. That was 2018. It was a huge revelation for me. And I'm going through something similar now. So, but this time it is around, it's around US politics. And so I'll kind of explain what that is and how it relates back to gardening, which I talked about at the beginning. So with US politics, I've been active in recent years since the current president, who is Donald Trump, since he was elected. So I'm not typically like that into politics, but I've been much more active, especially on Facebook, because of Donald Trump. And, again, like, doesn't matter to me what your politics are. I hope that you're accepting of my politics, but like, I don't support Donald Trump. And the biggest reason is because I don't feel like he's good for women, basically. And I don't even mean at a legislative level. I just mean like, I don't think he's respectful of women. He's got a lot of allegations of sexual assault against him, and I've spoken to lots of people who support him on this, and a lot of them, believe that he could have done some of those things and don't care. A lot of them believe that he didn't do those things, and so they're like supportive, they're supporters of him. And I can see the arguments on all sides. So I don't really have thoughts on that. I just know that I don't support him because of those things. And I accept that, like, I'm a pretty single issue voter. Like, I'm always going to vote for the candidate that I think is best for women, for women's rights, for women's, needs, and to, I think to kind of shake up the patriarchy. Like, I don't think the patriarchy is good for anyone of any gender, and so wanting to release that from our world and from our reality. So basically now, and this is fairly recent, again, I'm recording this in May of 2020. So right now, I was, and I have historically been a Republican, but in the more recent cycle, I voted for the Democrats. And I was planning to vote for Democrats again in this election cycle, which is November. And I've been, just active in those discussions on Facebook and elsewhere. And so unfortunately, though, the Democrats have a candidate who also has some sexual assault allegations against him. And, there's not, it's hard to say, like, what's true and what's not. I don't know. I don't know what's true and what's not. I personally think that you can find a link on the internet to support any opinion you have about this. So I don't really find those conversations to have much merit. I think it's just like how, I think in the end, it's like whatever people want to believe and whatever people want to justify, they're going to do so. So now that, basically going into our current election, like in 2020, we have two candidates who are, white, male, older, in their 70s, and they both have sexual assault allegations against them that cannot be proven true or false. Like, there's no real way to prove either side of that. So, back when Trump was elected, I felt just like sickened to my, like sick to my stomach that so many people supported him. And like, I would talk to those people and their reasoning was just like completely bonkers to me. And so as Biden, Joe Biden, as he became the nominee for the Democrats this year, I really just saw a lot of the same arguments. So it's like, there are lots of people who, when it comes to the Republican candidate, they are like completely against the person, and can you believe that he like sexually assaulted somebody? And then when it comes to the Democratic candidate or the Democrats candidate, they are like, no, it probably didn't really happen, this person is not credible and whatever. And I just saw like all of the same justifications from the last election cycle. I started seeing those again. And there was a lot of justification for like why this is different than it was last time. And so it really made me see that like something that people have been trying to tell me for a while, which was that, politics is, there's really not like the good guys and the bad guys. There are just, there are just two parties that are largely the same in so many ways. And a lot of people grabbing for power and a lot of people supporting one or the other because it validates their own opinions and beliefs. And so I don't, if you support one party strongly, I'm not trying to trigger you. This isn't a discussion about like why or why not the two parties are similar or dissimilar. I just wanted to say like I see the similarities between the parties, or I see some similarities between the parties, and it's helped me develop compassion for everybody who supports either party. So, as all of this is unfolding, this is, and we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and I'm starting gardening. And so I realized that, that a lot of the political stuff is, it's really just, it's like two ways of thinking that are actually on the same spectrum. And the two ways of thinking about problems, like especially about this pandemic, there's kind of like the people who believe in ecosystem, which is basically that, it's basically like, let's do what's best for the whole system, even if we have to sacrifice individuals as a result. And then there are people who believe in believe in the individual, and who would say like, well, not every individual wants to sacrifice themselves for the ecosystem, and everybody has inherent value, and we have to save as many people as possible, even if it hurts the overall ecosystem. And so there's kind of these two different beliefs. The people who believe in supporting the ecosystem over the individual have like kind of the survival of the fittest mentality. And then the people who believe in supporting the individual over the ecosystem have that everybody has inherent value mentality. And I realized through gardening, gardening is a very ecosystem, it's very geared toward the ecosystem. It's not geared toward any individual plant or any individual bug. It's basically like, we're going to like plant a lot of seeds, and only some of them are going to survive, and that's what's best for all of them. Like, that's what's best for the survival of the ecosystem. That's the mentality of gardening. So before I started gardening, I really didn't have to confront that at a deep level, and now I am. And before that, I was very much on the train of like, every individual has inherent value, and we have to save as many individuals as possible. So what I realized is that these two things are on the spectrum. So it's not that either is right or wrong. And it's the same with, I think like if you're familiar with US politics, you can kind of extrapolate this to the two different parties. It's not really that either side is right or wrong. They're actually just two ends of a spectrum. And this is what the law of polarity is about. It's the idea that these two things that we think are opposing are actually just on the same spectrum. So an easy example would be like hot and cold. So you could have a faucet that has a lever for hot and a lever for cold, or you could have like a faucet that has a way to like a spectrum of hot to cold. And it's two different perspectives. And I think a lot of people who are involved in politics, they kind of take the two handles, the hot handle and then the cold handle, and they kind of see it as like these are two very separate things, and you choose one over the other. And then if you the people who are not very into politics, they view it as much more of a spectrum. They view it as like one handle, and you just turn the dial to get, the amount of hot water and the amount of cold water that you want. And so I'm starting to see, like, especially through gardening, especially through the COVID crisis and a number of other things, through, seeing the two parties for kind of what they both really are. I'm starting to see it as much more of a spectrum, and thus transcending the duality of it. Similar to how I transcended the duality of religion versus spirituality. It's really like they're two things on a spectrum. So they're not really like opposing. They're actually the same thing, basically just different ends of the same spectrum. So I'm kind of doing the same for politics, and I've been called to really to stop posting about politics. I've been called to stay out of discussions about politics and to really just put my energy elsewhere right now. So that is another big healing for me, a big healing of separation. Now, if you are experiencing these big separations in your life, it's totally fine. For me, the reason I needed to experience that separation was because, really it's to transcend it, for starters, but it was also because I needed to, and I chose to learn that lesson through contrast, as opposed to healing it to begin with and then not having to experience a contrast of it. But either way, it's totally fine. You can heal it through either way. And it's also totally fine if you really believe in one thing or the other. So you don't have to believe what I believe. I'm not saying what I believe is right. I'm just saying that I have personally seen these things as two opposing viewpoints, and now I have integrated them and have brought them back into union within me. And again, this is important on the twin soul journey, because these two opposing sides that you create around specific topics, they're actually two opposing sides of yourself usually. And so being able to bring them back into union is a very, very good thing for your twin soul union. Like, it will bring you closer to your twin soul. So the last thing about this is, it's around the law of polarity. And that is what I think it's really a valuable concept to study. So I think twin souls, it's rooted in the idea of the law of attraction, 100%. Like being on the twin soul journey and trying to come back into union with your twin soul is really just law. It's just law of attraction principles. And everything that I teach is just like law of attraction for relationships, basically. And that's like largely what the twin soul curriculum is, or like what we know about twin souls. It's largely around law of attraction principles. But I think the law of polarity is also really valuable because it really is about seeing opposing things as a spectrum. So when you look at the twin soul journey, for example, if you want to apply the law of polarity to twin souls, you can see that separation and union, like physical separation and physical union, are really just the same thing. They're just on the spectrum of each other, or they're just on the same spectrum through the law of polarity. So, it's like, I think sometimes we see like separation as opposing union. And in truth, we just need to bring those concepts back into union. We need to integrate them because within you on your twin soul journey, you are experiencing both separation and union from your twin, from and with your twin. And I know for me, I'm going to do another video on this or another recording on this at some point. For me, even though I'm in union with my twin soul, like we are physically in a relationship, I still experience separation from him in a variety of ways. And every single time I have to heal that separation to grow our relationship or to go deeper into our relationship. And that's still happening even though we're in a physical union. So if you are experiencing separation as, like my twin soul blocked me, or my twin soul is with somebody else, or whatever else, then this is a concept that you can apply so that you can see that it's just, separation to union, it's just a dial. And as you heal separation, you're just turning that dial closer to union. And at some point, as you turn that dial, you're going to come into physical union. And it could be like toward the beginning. It could also be toward the end. You can turn the dial as fast as you want, or you can, not. You can heal separation with specifically thinking of your twin soul, like with your twin soul in mind, or you can just heal separation in general. It really doesn't even matter. Like the things I'm healing, like I'm just healing separation in general. And that is bringing me deeper into my twin soul union. So I hope this was really helpful to you. And definitely let me know what you think of this idea of the law of polarity. And I know I gave a lot of detailed examples, and I do not mean to offend anybody. And I hope that we can just be transcendent and not get mired in the details, because they were just examples. So anyway, hope this was helpful to you. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a beautiful and blessed day.